Welcome back to the CX Insider podcast. On today's episode, we have the return of a very special guest that goes all the way back to episode 74, Sham Aziz. Today, he joins us as the founder of the Thecxway, a customer service consultancy, speaking all about the journey of creating his own brand and the benefits of using a consultancy. We'll also be talking about in-store experiences, retail redundancies, and the outcomes surrounding restructuring. Enjoy the episode. And if you do, subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content. This episode has been brought to you by ACF Technologies, global leaders in customer experience management solutions. Now let's get into the episode. Welcome back to the podcast. Last time you were here was in 2022. Can you tell us a bit about how you've developed and progressed?
2022, what a roller coaster from then till today.
Do you like roller coasters?
I used to when I was younger, and then I've just found that as I've hit my 40s that, my appetite for it doesn't match my physical capability for it.
That's a very good response. Love that.
So if I maybe try and highlight a couple of things since then and now, we could dig into them. 2022, 23, coming into 24, probably one of the biggest projects I ever did, rapidly bookended with a redundancy. And there's lots of those going around at the moment. And then started up my own company, probably in the way that only I could have done it for those people that know me and for those that don't. My LinkedIn's quite open book about who I am and what I do. And also maybe the other thing that sort of stands out over the last 2 years is I took my son, who's 11, to our first local football match. And so we're Spurs supporters, and I know that might go down not so well.
Well, that's just lost us a lot of listeners. That's it, we're done.
That might not go down too well.
Who's your local team then?
My local team is Cheshunt Town.
Okay.
And so we went there together, Father and Sunday. We went to our first football match, and I think he's a bit of a troll, my son, actually.
Is he?
Yeah, he was out shouting at the other team, and so I kind of had to rein him in a little bit, but it was just a wonderful experience and another milestone. So that roller coaster has been both personally developing, but also professionally.
Actually, I'm a United fan, and we played you not that long ago.
Yeah, indeed.
To be honest with you, probably should have beaten us in the end. We were rubbish the second half.
It was a tricky match. We actually watched that match together, and he was frustrated after the first goal, and he was like, "All right, that's it, we're losing." I'm like, "Mate, come on,
we're playing United.
Yeah.
They can't play."
It's going to happen.
Octavian's a City fan, by the way,
so
over there.
I'll be seeing you this month.
So me and him regularly have arguments, and I always bring up history because that's all I've got to hold on to at the moment because we're horrendous. But then obviously he's got all the trophies and everything.
And we're making it right now. We're making the history.
We'll edit you out, all right? Yeah. So 2022 was a roller coaster for both work and personal, with some milestones. So you mentioned that you'd have to say any organisation names or anything like that, but you mentioned you worked on a very large project, and then it was kind of like ended with redundancy. How long did that project take?
Yeah.
How much of your life was it consuming?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's kind of all, I guess, linked into wider macro, micro economic climate. And as you guys know, there's just multiple business restructures, brands disappearing, brands emerging, consolidation, redundancies, all of that good stuff. And so as part of the project I did for a large retailer in the UK, it was probably one of the best projects I've done, not just in terms of value, but pace, trying to move quickly, essentially shoring up with a partnership, another supplier after another one didn't make it. And so very quickly finding out that I'm losing a partnership to finding another one and setting up and transitioning. It was a very interesting project, very good from a professional, personal development perspective. Delivered the hell out of it. A high five from the COO, from the CEO. Saturday Night Fever playing in the background, going down the corridor. I get to the end. HR director calls me over and says, "Your role's at risk." And and I'm like, "Wait, what?"
Wow.
So, little bit embellishment there, but you get the idea. And so it just goes to show you that nothing's ever guaranteed in life. And it doesn't matter how good you are and what you do and how you do it. In the end, some things are bigger than the person. And redundancy round.
And when was this? This was it?
Last year.
The end of it?
End of last year. So October time, heading into Christmas without a role.
Perfect timing that.
You almost think, couldn't have made this up. And look, I empathize also with those that had to make those decisions and carry out that process. I don't think anybody wins, and it's not a nice process for either side of the table. You can't help but I think, or at least from my perspective, and there's so many that have been through this redundancy process, almost every other LinkedIn post now is about some sort of redundancy and how people feel. But yeah, a tiny little bit of me was like, oh my God, this is rejection after doing such a great job for a number of years, quite well known within my industry at least. And then just sort of thinking, that's it really. Now what? And so I think after I'd sort of licked my wounds for a little bit and came to the realization that it's not a personal decision, it's business.
Yeah.
I thought, well, time for me to put my business hat on and go at it. And, I had 2 goals in October by the end of the year that I would speak to 100 different people. And I just plucked that number out of the sky. Part of it was go after it and see what happens. And the second goal was to try and get a role before Christmas. So 100 people, 1 job. That they were sort of my odds that I went after. So I hit the phones, and when I say hit the phones, it's not in the traditional cold calling sense. I started with my network, which I've built up over the last 10 years on LinkedIn and also in person. I got in contact with people that I know, and we just spoke. I didn't hit the phones and start selling.
Start pitching.
It wasn't like that. It was a hey.
Those days are gone, to be honest.
Yeah, it's there's still, some of the younger crew are, learning that way, but it was just a, hey, how you doing? It's been a while. Here's what's happened. Here's the situation I'm in. Is there anything you need any help with? Are there any roles that you know of that you could put me on to? And so it was a case of not just saying to people, could you find me a role, but have you noticed any roles that I haven't, just because of the way the algorithm works? When
you say roles, were you looking at that time for a full-time role or a piece of work or a project, or what kind of thing? What's your thought process there? Because obviously we're going to have listeners, and you're right, every other post, or if you go through your LinkedIn feed, and mine's probably quite similar to yours, we're both quite broad, and there is posts. And I think when you lose your role, there's obviously a temptation to go and find another role, almost like panic.
Yeah.
And be like, I've got bills to pay, family to feed, get another job. Or you can get your entrepreneurial hat on and think, you know what, I can do this. Where were you? What was your thought process? Were you Mr. Entrepreneur? Were you Mr. Panic, I need to get money in? Or a bit of both? Or what was that?
All of it, all of the above. I think I started off with the view that I've got some equity with regards to my CV and the roles that I've done. And so good job titles and brands behind me. So let's go after interviews. Let's try and get another role. And I did do that. And then through that process of just talking to various people within my network, as I was saying to them, are there roles that you're aware of? Are there brands that you're aware of that have a challenge that I could help solve? A couple of them came back and said no. And then one of them said to me, but there is this project that I need doing. If you're not up to anything, did you want to pick that up for me? And then I was like, yeah, I could do that. Okay. And that kind of started to escalate because I started to get my second one, my third one, and my fourth one. Now, whilst there weren't necessarily roles, and for some of those projects, just a couple of hours, but my thoughts were, I need to speak to 100 people. And so I kept working through the numbers, and I kept doing these little projects, and through going to various breakfast meetings, lunches, coffees. I mean, I drink hot chocolate and that kind of stuff, not necessarily a coffee. Otherwise I'd probably be climbing the walls with how many times I sat down and spoke to somebody. But one of the questions I asked each person I spoke to that I knew was, is there anybody you think I could speak to that you know that I don't? And that helped me sort of extend my network, but in a warm way, because people were putting me in touch with people they knew, and they were introducing me first. This is Sham. Here's what he does. He's in the market. Could you have a chat with him? And through that then led me to my first, I don't want to call it a bigger win, but it led me to a role. Okay. And so I was able to pick up a part-time contract, and suddenly it just sort of changed my outlook. And that was in October, and I managed to pick up the contract in November. So I hadn't necessarily...
That's not bad. That's really good. Quick. That's that 100 people thing. That's a good idea.
Yeah, so that was kind of the goal. Now, one of the challenges I got, and it was me that challenged myself in a weird sort of Fight Club mode where I was talking to myself was by just going after 100 people and not necessarily being targeted, am I just being a busy fool? But the other part of me just thought that there's an opportunity here that I might not know exists because I'm filtering up front.
Yeah.
And rather than do that, I just thought I'm just going to get busy. And, you know, the closest analogy I have to it is when I started to pick up running as a hobby. My first goal was I'm just going to put my trainers on and I'm just going to leave the house and then I'll run as far or as long as I can.
Yeah.
Not necessarily having a goal in mind. And so I took that running philosophy into this 100 people that I'm going to talk to. And I didn't discriminate, if you like, or over-filter. And very quickly I ended up winning a handful of projects, which then led on to a handful of contracts. And I was able to go through Christmas with a role. I think that helped to settle the minds of my family. But also, I guess it was the universe, or however you want to put it, telling me that with every closed door there's another one.
Yeah, there is.
And if there isn't, you can probably
if you envisage opportunities and you put yourself out there, they will come. If you sat and you felt sorry for yourself and was like, I failed, then no one's going to speak to you, are they? Because you're not making that effort, you're not making those opportunities. Sounds like you had a good attitude, and you've now, as we sit here now, you've obviously started up your own organisation.
Yeah.
And that's called
the Thecxway. Yeah, I say I started up my own organization. It sounds really quite clever, and it probably didn't happen as smoothly as I'm making it sound. It was in response to the project where I was getting, I needed a vehicle to be able to deliver those projects. Probably didn't make sense that, you know, I was emailing people from my Hotmail address, and I have one of the old...
Can't do that, Sham. Come on. Yeah.
I had
Particularly if it's the first Hotmail address you ever made. That's always an embarrassing one.
Yeah, exactly.
We've all got one of those email addresses.
Skaterboy98 at hotmail.com, you know. So that wasn't my email address. But there was this element of I needed to, I guess, get an email address going at least, and a brand going, something that, not in the traditional sense of brand, but something that people could associate with me that could also talk to the industry that I was trying to attract. And so being a customer service specialist, a CX specialist, thought, right, I need to set up a vehicle, a company, I need a name, I need an email address. And they were sort of my 3 goals for that week. And so I kind of went after it in the same approach as I did with the 100 people thing. I hit Squarespace and got their domain name generator up.
Yeah.
I used an AI tool online. I typed in customer service, customer experience, and I just kept playing around with it. I had my phone with me and I was WhatsApping a couple of really close, trusted friends, different names at the same time, getting their feedback, typing away, feedback, typing away, break for lunch, go for a run, come back, bit more. And then by the afternoon, I narrowed it down to 2. And then I got to the Thecxway, and there was a little bit in the back of my mind that this kind of flows. And so I thought, that's not going to be available.
No.
So I went on Squarespace, typed it in, available immediately, $9.95 if you buy today. Hell yes.
Done.
Click, done. And
You look out for the renewal next year, it'll be 60 quid.
I'm sure it will. So I fired that up, and then Squarespace have a deal with Google, and so I was able to set up Gmail through that, get the email address going. So yeah, by the end of the day, I had a domain, an email, a company name, and that was, I guess, a tick box exercise. And all of these
You've never done anything like that before?
Never, first time.
Okay.
And with a lot of these things, if I didn't know how to do it, I would Google how to, or I would go on YouTube and say how to. So I had to get my own website, I had to get my own email address, that kind of thing. And then I would just try and give it a go. And these sort of little milestones were reassurances for me that, okay, I'm making progress here.
Yeah.
By the beginning of the day to the end of the day, I've got an email address, I've got a company name, I've got a website, and
becomes real.
It became tangible, and I could say to people, yeah, I've started up my own business, and I then set up a LinkedIn page for it. I then started to build the Squarespace site for it, and even that as a process, you know, I was daunted by the idea of building my own website and Squarespace. You know, the marketing is really good, and it's like, hey, have your own site, and then I was like, oh my god, how do I make it look decent or at least reflect me and my
Well, I was going to say, because you've obviously come from working for large organisations that have got quite literally millions of pounds worth of marketing budget. They've got design teams. I mean, we know what it's like, don't we? If we won't even want to get a brochure to develop, it goes between like several meetings, and all of a sudden but your skill set might not be creative and editing JPEGs to the right size and making, so it's interesting to hear about how those tools were.
I had two sort of thought processes right at the beginning. Part of it was, this is not my skill set. Should I outsource this? Should I go with an Upwork or a freelancer and tell them what I need and just get that to come back? But also being a startup with £0 investment, in my mind, I also felt that it was an opportunity to upskill a little bit in a couple of basic things that would also keep me busy and give me some development. And so if it got too complicated, I'd go get some help, and like logos, for example, or if it was something that I could watch a YouTube video on and then recreate it myself, I did that. And so day one, looked at the website, looked at the template, thought, oh my God, don't know where to start. Changed my approach. Back to the running analogy, when I first started running, I would just run 4 or 5 minutes a day and then slowly build that up. And so I thought, I'm going to spend 10 minutes every night doing one thing on the website. And by the end of the week, I had a website. And so it was just, again, I got to the end of the week and I felt like I had accomplished something. I had a new skill. I had a functioning website that I could show people. And so very quickly, these little milestones were reassuring to me, made me feel like I could still achieve stuff. And after that sort of redundancy piece in the back of my mind, that rejection, I'm going to call it, to have this reassurance was quite nice. And so I kind of thought, okay, next, what's next? I've got the website, got the name, got an email address. I'm talking to people. And then winning my first big client, my first proper contract, multiple month contract. That was just me sort of saying to myself, boy, done good.
Yeah.
It's, again, it wasn't personal. And I know it wasn't personal, but it was a nice universal reassurance that I'm still here.
No, you've got to have the little wins and measurable wins, particularly when you have a redundancy bit of news. And also, when you're starting cold, which you kind of are, you can't just expect to pick up the phone and suddenly close a contract with one of the biggest retailers in the UK and that's it, you're done. I mean, that could happen, potentially, but you did the right thing, measuring these little wins, getting yourself in a positive mindset. Obviously, you've won quite a few bits of business, but you've won your largest contract. And I suppose for our listeners, I know your background. I know you've been on a previous episode on CX Insider, but now that you are a consultant or consultancy, what would you say is the benefits of someone using a consultancy or someone of your skill set rather than, say, employing someone in-house? What are the benefits of using something like that? And you've mentioned it, and I'm sure our listeners know this, Octavian knows as well, that certain industries, we mentioned retail, going through a tough time, and certainly CX departments are possibly shrinking. I'd also like your bit of feedback on that. And obviously, is that a short-term thing? Is it a long-term thing? Is it a short-sighted thing? But yeah, sorry, there's lots of questions there in one go.
Yeah, no worries. And we'll try and pick them off as we can, as long as you agree to remind me on the bits that I'm missing.
Of course, yeah. Octavian, you've got to do that because I will forget.
Yeah, so I guess why would you use a consultancy? So there's something in there around speed and there's something in there around capability / competency. And so if we take the analogy of a mortgage broker, if you went to go and renew your mortgage and you went to, I'm going to pick a bank and I'm just going to go there, I like the deal and I'm just going to take it. What I guess you don't know is what you don't know about other deals that are out there and whether they were more suitable to begin with. And then one of the benefits of a consultant is they have that market knowledge outside of your initial view and what's in front of you. And they can say, well, have you considered this? So most consultants, those that are worth their bread, they'll have case studies that they can sort of pull together. And with all of those different case studies in mind, then you get more options. There's a couple of memes online somewhere on LinkedIn where there's an engineer that walks into a room and it's a large machine and multiple engineers had tried to fix it that were already there. But this engineer with like 1,000 years experience walks in, has a little feel around, gets out a spanner and taps it in the corner and suddenly it fixes the problem.
Yeah.
And they're like, it just took you 2 minutes. We're going to pay you for the 2 minutes. And actually what goes into that 2 minutes is all of the years before of experience to know where to go with what tool and to tap it. And I think that's where I would sort of call the parallels with a good consultant that can come in and help you figure that out. And one of the sort of the newer words out on the market is fractional. And the beauty of fractional within today's current economic climate and, macroeconomics and budgets and sign-off amounts, You can fractionally get somebody to come in who's a specialist, pick off a problem area, tidy it up for you, give you a solution, and then leave. And so it enables you to become more nimble, solve a focused problem quickly, and in some cases, it gives you an opportunity to test and try that consultant out too. And if you like the output and the results, you can then say, well, here's another problem, and here's another one. And
what happens if could you as a consultant and other consultancies also help identify the problem?
yeah,
Does that make sense? Like, you may have a business that you believe is successful, but you might be getting bad feedback from consumers or something. Could they speak to a consultant and go, you've got to help us? We don't know what we're failing at, but we're definitely failing at something.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think there's also this piece around your industry. What industry are you targeting? Who are your customers that you're going after? So let's just take the example of the sneakers/trainer space. If that's your specialism, that's what you're great at, that's probably what you and your team should focus on. Like, be the best at that. And then if you've got a problem and you're not sure about how to solve it, let the consultant come in and be the best at that part to identify your problem, help you with it, give you some solutions, and or at least just tell you what the problem is. Because sometimes the problem is nuanced, and what you think might be the problem isn't. It's masquerading as something else. And so I think that's where, as a specialist as you are in your industry, the consultant that comes in should ideally be the same in what they know to look for. Very quickly within the customer service industry, there are a handful of metrics, KPIs, service levels that are specific to customer service. And so you could learn those quite easily. You could figure those out over time, and you could understand what that is. You might even have a view on what good looks like. You might Google it. You might speak to one or two other businesses. A great consultant will just tell you immediately what's a great SLA, what's a great KPI, what's a vanity KPI, one that you want to avoid, what does good look like. They can just tell you that. And so if you imagine spending days, weeks, months Googling stuff, or just having somebody walk up to you and just give you the answer, then you can get on with what it is you want to do. And so I think there's that piece around, do you want to be everything to everyone, or do you want to focus on what you want to focus on? And then if you keep that in mind, could a consultant come and help you?
Going back to redundancies, what are some improvements retail companies can make when undergoing restructuring? And are there any consequences to this?
I think potentially room for improvement would be that what I'm seeing is that most retailers go to that quite quickly as a playbook. How do we cut costs? That's like the first question. And part of me just wonders whether that's the easy tool to reach for, because the consequences of cutting costs are far reaching. It's not just as simple as we need to remove X cost and so we'll just do a restructure and remove some people. Sometimes you have people that you weren't expecting to leave who then want to leave, and the knock-on effect in terms of morale and culture for those left behind, and picking up somebody else's work because you're in a team of 10 and suddenly the new team is 4 people. So how do they deliver the output? And of course, every exec would say, well, we won't do the same output, we'll recut it and do things differently. But the reality on the ground isn't that simple. You don't suddenly, from 100% of the work, start to deliver 40 because there's 4 of you.
No,
it's
absolutely
not. The maths are not directly correlated. And so the consequences of cutting and restructuring, I think, are quite far reaching. And of course, I would say that because I was on the receiving end of it. But it then sort of follows that if you look at their journeys after they've made these redundancies and restructures, do those businesses survive? Do they go on to flourish again? Some of them, no. Some of them, yes. And so I guess the jury's out. But if I had to sort of repoint it and say, what else would I look at in a playbook before I get to that stage of restructuring, would be to go back to your value proposition as a retailer. What is it you're trying to do? And really ask yourself that question. Are you trying to be everybody to everyone, or everything to everyone? And I would say, Maslow's hierarchy, go back to your hygiene, go back to your basics, do less, but do it better. Do it really well. Give people a reason to pick you over somebody else. There are some products that multiple different retailers will stock. So why should somebody come to you instead of somebody else? Is that because you have an experiential wrapper around it so that somebody comes to you not just to buy the product, but to experience something and then buy the product? Or could you execute operationally in a way that nobody else does? So what I mean by that is basics: get the delivery there on time, stock availability, easy payments, easy returns. These things just sound like common sense, but you'll be surprised, and I'm sure on the receiving end, of how all of these things can go wrong. Even today in 2024, there are payment issues, returns issues, delivery issues, and so there's a point there, I think, around, could you differentiate through an experiential wrapper? Is there something about you that should make somebody come to you? If you're finding that a bit difficult to do, let's say, I don't know, you're a SaaS provider in the AI space, it's quite hard to stand out. And so, it's going to be less about the experiential wrapper around it. But is there a quick way that you could operationally within your business demonstrate a thorough approach that gets somebody live really quickly? So, easy integrations, go live quick, fast return so you can see the output of it. And so I think these...
Do you think, so just interrupt on that, so things like ROI, you mentioned about SaaS, it's a huge space and there's a huge amount of organizations and it's probably quite saturated in some markets. But, ultimately the organization that I work for, we offer a SaaS-based solution. And one of the things that we try and focus on is ultimately defining the ROI to the organization. So if we were, say, speaking to retail, from what you've just said, it sounds very evident that retailers have to evolve, they have to adapt, they have to make redundancies. Would you believe that, not just for our SaaS solution, for any SaaS solution, presenting things like the ROI is imperative? Is that something you would definitely recommend? Or?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the operational point that I was making earlier about doing less better. There are a handful of things that just lend themselves really well to SaaS solutions. And so, if you're just sort of doing repetitive tasks at an hourly rate, which also probably isn't very fulfilling for a human to do, then those things could you achieve better through a SaaS solution. Take AI as an example. Could you automate emails? Where's my order? Let's automate that. Let's not have somebody get 50 of those emails and for the 50th one, they're then tracking another order. That kind of stuff, automate it, get rid of it, eliminate it, solve the journey further upstream so that a customer doesn't have to even contact you for tracking. There's ways to take all of that noise out, which then you're not paying to service that noise, but also from a customer retention perspective, NPS, satisfaction, that customer is getting a better journey. And so it kind of pays itself off. And I think that's where SaaS businesses have done really well to build ROI calculators where they can help you quickly understand. And so I think with most businesses, you'll have a view, a feeling, a gut instinct around whether a SaaS provider is able to deliver value to you. What you have to be careful of, in my view, is what do you do after that? So whether that's with your team or people who are no longer doing these things for you because you've put a SaaS solution in, how can you retarget, refocus, or give them better enhancing tasks, roles, capabilities, jobs? How can they provide more customer value? How do we reorientate what people do in conjunction with taking out easy things that SaaS could replace?
Yeah. This is a bit of a random question, but a lot of the things that you've just said, and if I'm wrong, obviously step in, they sound to me that they're things that you can implement based on a service level for like online and e-commerce and returns and distribution. What about in-store? Can you use technology? Anything that you as a consultant would recommend people look at to improve the in-store experience? Because, there's been another few large retailers disappear, brands. Since the last time we spoke, House of Fraser have been they're in real trouble. Who else has gone? Wilko's disappeared. And I love the fact that you just said about look at your value proposition. Wilko's, what was their value proposition? Originally, it was things for extremely good value, but then they started doing DIY hardware and then they started doing food. And then it was like, okay. Bit like Woolworths many years ago. It's like, what the hell are you actually? What are you?
Yeah.
And obviously they failed. In terms of in-store, what kind of things would you recommend on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So in-store, I guess one of the differences between in-store and online is that the customer's there. or in theory they're there, that you want them to be there. So with that in mind, what could you do differently to enhance that experience? I'll give you a very quick example of large department stores that used to have coffee shops or restaurants within them. So those would open and close at the same time as those stores. And in order to get to them, you'd have to go into the stores first and find your way there. That model got flipped on its head more recently, where they open and close when it's right for them to open and close, and you can actually get to them directly from the street without having to go through a store.
Okay.
And so they stand up on their own, because the idea is that, we'll get somebody to come in, walk through the store, walk past product before they get to the coffee place or to the restaurant. And so we'll get them to shop and then they can eat. But actually there's a flip reverse on that says if somebody is coming to eat after that, they might then go through the store as something to do. Or if they have a reservation, they've made it a bit early, they might go and have a little mooch around and see what's going on in the store. So it's that flip reverse of, don't do an IKEA and make them walk through everything to get
all that way to get your meatballs at the end.
Yeah, to get to your meatballs at the end. So, and by the way, IKEA are very successful. So they
No, absolutely. But no, you're right. There are other stores like Dunelm have coffee shops in them. The Range have coffee shops in them. Primark have coffee shops in them. But I was just, as you're saying that, I was thinking, Primark now, they're like normally Costas, or like you can access them directly from the high street. Or from it's good.
Yeah,
so never thought of it like that.
It's separating it in that example, and I think why this has happened, and it's all just speculation on my part. But the business case originally would have been, hey, we're going to put this here, and there's going to be additional footfall, and you're going to get additional sales from it. But if you sort of detach it from the idea that a coffee shop has to then help you sell product, but you put it with the customer in mind, that a customer who is here to shop or may come to shop might also like to have a coffee, then you're putting the customer first in a different way that doesn't rely on your product having to be sold. And as a happy coincidence or consequence, you then see your product and or experience take place. So, department stores that have cinemas on site, or
amazing idea.
Like if you go to like the malls in Dubai, you can do indoor skydiving and you can buy something. So there's lots of different things that give.
So you think experiences are key? They're a big thing. Depends if it's a transactional thing. I bought a coffee earlier.
Sure.
Obviously, I want the coffee shop to be clean, but ultimately, I want my coffee. I want in and out. I've got to get on a train. But you mentioned about a cinema being in a retail store. That's obviously to do with experience. Do you think experience is a big way of helping footfall and retaining customers? Or
Indeed, yeah. I think there's absolutely a market around experience where, whether you do that on your own or whether you do it with your family or whoever you're doing it with, friends, experiences bind people together and give them something from what it is they're doing, whether that's something to do with their life or whether it's to pass some time or whatever it is. Time just moves in one direction, right? And so how do you get through that time in the most pleasant way that you can? I'm making it sound
shopping with the kids on a Saturday.
Yeah.
The most pleasant way you can. Actually, random question, but do you still go? Obviously, we all go food shopping because we have to. Do you still go shopping on a Saturday or a Sunday? Does that ever happen? Or do you do more online shopping? I mean, because what's your opinion on that? Because to me, the whole generation thing of if you were going shopping, I don't know, you're like Octavian, that seems to be a dying trend.
Yeah.
Going to the local big town or city, like a Blue Water shopping centre and spending 7-8 hours there. That seems to be reduced to me, but maybe I'm wrong. What's your opinion on that? Do you still do that?
Yeah, a little bit. I guess it depends on where we're trying to go with it. I think, the big weekly shop, which mostly was around, the grocery shop. And so you'd go once a week, do a big grocery shop, and then you go to the smaller expresses throughout the week to just top up certain things. And then the rise of other players into that market, your Aldis and Lidls of the world came along to go and buy my meat products, so halal meat specifically. I'll go to the Turkish butcher, and so that's a weekly occurrence. I'll go buy my meat.
That's probably more of an experience than going to Aldi.
Yeah, because it's precisely what I want, and the butcher's there, and the butcher,
and he knows you.
He knows me, and he can cut the meat how I want it, and prep it in the right way and I can get some advice. And I know some retailers offer that, but it's a slightly different experience.
And what about non-grocery products? I don't know. Let's say you want to buy a new TV. Your son wanted a PS5 for Christmas. I don't know if he did, but let's say he did. Would you just order that online? Would you go into an electronic retailer and experience it? What would your kind of go-to be?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So let's take both of those examples, right? So it's Xbox rather than PS5.
I'm Xbox as well. I don't know why I said PlayStation.
No,
Are you PlayStation?
It's all good.
I'm Xbox too. Yeah, go on.
Not to start any wars, but so he wanted an Xbox. Of course he did. And there was the idea of pricing on Xbox, research on which one, because there's two different models at the moment, so the S and the X. And so all of that research took place online. And yes, I could have quickly just bought it online, and there'll be a retailer somewhere that has £5 off, £10 off, or some sort of deal and has quick delivery and great reputation at doing that. But then there was also the opportunity that I did all my research online, but now as a family, we can go have a day of, get the Xbox,
it's an experience to remember,
have a meal, do something together, kill off a few hours as well, but make memories together also. And so I sort of mix it up. There are some things that I'll quickly buy online and, Amazon, very quick and easy.
Yeah, of course. Next day it's delivered because you needed it then. Yeah.
Versus, this is something that could wait for all three of us as a family to do together at the same time. And so, it just depends on what it is and what time it is.
I love that. I think some of that magic's lost. In fact, the magic is lost when you just buy something online and it just turns up in the Amazon box with a tape on it. And obviously your son will remember that, because I think every man and girl remembers their first proper games console. Yeah. I've still got mine. I've kept it. I refuse to sell it or get rid of it. It's in the loft. But that's an experience. Oh, yeah, I remember I got my Xbox. Which one did you get him?
So the S is what we got.
Makes sense.
And he loves it. He's all over it. He decided one day that he needed the X, and I asked him why, and he couldn't tell me. And so I'd realised that consumerism has gotten to him, and whatever he's watching has told him that he needs
the YouTube shorts and watching people.
But, he moved on from that pretty quickly.
Okay. What's his go-to game?
His go-to game, he's sort of flicking in between FC24 and Fortnite. FC24. After the World Cup in Qatar, he sort of went football crazy. And so since then, he got the next couple of iterations. And at the moment, he's playing FC24.
Okay. So you've had a bit of an adventurous 2023. You've had, in my opinion, a very productive and proactive final Q4 of 2023. And I think hats off to you and fair play, kudos for doing that and getting that business in. What do you think 2024 has entailed for you?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. Part of, I guess, what happened is that you realize you can't necessarily control the uncontrollables. Mm-hmm. And so with that sort of renewed realization, 24 is going to happen the way that it was going to happen, regardless of what I think will or won't and what I think I can or can't do. So for me, it's about being prepared and positioning. And so the way to do that is to make sure that my knowledge is on point. I'm speaking to the next 100 people that I need to speak to.
Okay.
And just be prepared and position myself in a way that when that next opportunity comes, I'm ready to service it and just deliver the hell out of it.
Love it.
It's good. Yeah.
It is good.
Do it the Thecxway.
Yeah, love that.
And that concludes the end of the episode. Thank you to everyone for listening. I've been Octavian, and I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. Let us know what you think by carrying on the conversation on LinkedIn. This episode has been brought to you by ACF Technologies, global leaders in customer experience management solutions.
You guys normally do there's like a thumbnail or a screenshot. It's usually three people sitting on the sofa. Can we do it differently? Could the three of us stand up in a boy band pose? So where you stand like that and you look down.
Okay. What, like a fist pump or something?
No.
I know what you mean. Yeah, all right, come on.
So, these ones where you do that.
All right, we can do that.
Try.
Yeah, we can do that.
Oh, no. The boy band pose. To be fair, we can pull this off. Yeah.
Yeah, even if it's from the knees up.
No, I know what you mean. This is be fun. Okay. Is it like this?
Yeah, so you just do that.
Do that.
A little play on like Backstreet Boys, but Sham is back.
Sham is back.
Oh, Sham is back. There you go.